Greetings, back again. Normally people start with a little video of themselves, so I thought, I guess I should join the trend, right? So today I want to talk about two things, so let's get started. So here we are at my sloppy workstation. I want to talk about these two pens. These are my Sailor Compass pens. These are medium fine steel nibbed pens. As you can see, they're demonstrator pens. And they go anywhere from, I've seen them as low as $22, but they retail for $49.95, and they're pretty doable at around 30 bucks. And I have a number of these. I like these pens for a number of reasons that I won't go into right now. But these have been sort of long-termers that I've been using all summer long. This is now October, and these pens have been filled and refilled a couple of times since I started going on my binge back in, I guess it was June. So this sailor has been living on a diet of Atramentis Brown, permanent document brown, and this yellow compass has been using this very nice Visconti Sepia, and this is a really nice color. Well, both of these pens and both of these inks that I've been using this summer are now coming to their end, and I want to go back to using the regular colors. This pen usually uses the Visconti, and this pen is usually filled with Noodler's Apache Sunset. The reason why I like those colors is because they're pushable with a water pen, but they're both about empty, and so they're going to go back to their deliberations. And, oh, well, I guess they're not quite empty. They're getting close. Here, we'll draw on the back of this. There's nothing on that side, so got a little, little piece of something there. Oh, that's good enough. Yeah, so, but if I want to push the colors, I can. As you can see, the pen is starting to get dry. But if I want to be able to run those tones, I can just take my water pen and I can push that color around and get some very nice effects using just a hint of water and some shading. And we can get some nice imagery coming up here that we can do other things with. Now this, of course, the Visconti, is pushable with water. This Atramentis Document Brown, on the other hand, is not that way at all. This is wet, so it would just smear if I draw in it. But if I were to draw another face, and give that a moment to dry, we can take this same water pen and try to push that one. And even though it's only been just a short time, you can see that it's still pushable in the areas where the ink is very heavy, but you can see that it's drying fairly quickly. So this ink, when it does dry, is pretty permanent, and I very much like the qualities of the ink. But one of the things that I was curious about was, see, it's starting to dry pretty hard there, whereas this ink is still, I can still lift it and move it around to do other things with it. As my face starts to look a little on the scary side here, let's push some, but you know, you can practically make it dissolve till there's nothing left. But you can continue to lift this ink, whereas this one is going to be almost immovable now. And in fact, it is now. You can see that it's not going anywhere. So the Atramentis Document Brown is very stable once it's dry and very water resistant. Now, I could use a solvent on it. I could probably move it with solvents, but I don't bother with that. It's nothing that if someone really needs to steal my check, they probably need the money more than I do. But I thought what we would do is we would clean these pens and see what is going on with these inks. Now, there's still a little bit of the Visconti left in this one. This pen has more ink in it than I would like to get rid of. So maybe we'll empty that pen into the bottle. Oh, there it goes. That is a danger that you have to watch out with these bottles. They have these little bases. So, best way to avoid that issue, you drop it in the cap. That way it's pretty stable. It makes it easy to unscrew. So, let's just dump this pen. We're going to empty it down into the bottle. And there really wasn't much ink left in that at all. And let me see, let's get a tissue to put down so that we don't get everything dirty on my already very dirty desk. So that is the Visconti. And I'll just do that for now. And we won't bother with the Atrementis. This ink is what's in this pen. Now, this pen is pretty empty already. It doesn't really have any ink left in it, even if I were to push it up now, look. So you can see that the Document Brown really runs well right up to the very last drop, which is a good thing. But one of the things that I'm curious about is, what does this nib and nib section look like after 3 months of constant use using that Document Brown compared to the Visconti? I want to see what this looks like inside, so let's take it apart. We'll put this over here. Let's take this sucker apart, right? We're going to take that cartridge, and we want to put that cartridge. We want to keep things together. Stay organized, right? And let's pull this sucker apart. Let's pull it out. So, the section looks pretty clean. I mean, I don't really see... I've got a little bit of residual here at the top of the nib. That went rolling off, didn't it? Here we go. And let's take a look at the feed. So as you can see, the feed has got some ink in there, but I see no chunks, no hunks, no clumps, no glibs, no grabs, no globs. So let's just try rinsing that off a little bit here. Normally I would do this at the sink, of course, but in the interests of science, let's take a look at the back side of that nib. Now we can see that we've got some ink there, but I'll bet that'll just wipe right off. And it does. So the Atrementis Brown, oh, there's just a little bit of scum that is on there. How hard is that to get off? Okay, it's putting up a bit of a fight. And this is the reason why I like to use these steel nib pens for my document inks, because sometimes they want to put up a little bit of a fight. Let me see, I've got a Q-tip around here. So this one, I was using this Q-tip earlier for pushing some paint. So I don't know if you can see that, but there's just the smallest amount of paint caked on that edge. Is this a big deal? Nah, it's not going to affect the way the pen runs at all. And I'm just going to buff this with a dry Q-tip and see if that'll just rub off. And it's coming up just by rubbing it. But again, this is the reason why I like to use steel nib pens for this kind of thing, for my document inks, as opposed the Atrementis document inks, as opposed to gold nibbed pens. Now, it is possible that this stuff might not stick to the gold as much as it does the stainless steel. That is a possibility that I haven't really looked into. But the document inks do tend to dry just a hair on the nibs, and then I've got to be a little more aggressive and get that off. But typically, it comes off pretty easily. And as far as the feeds go, you can see that it's discolored the feed. If I were to brush this, here, I've got a bowl of water over here. Let me get that into the frame. Maybe that would be a nice thing to do, right? And we'll just use a cheap paintbrush on this here. We'll just see if we can't just brush some of this out. Now, the reason why I wanted to do this little experiment on camera is because I have other Sailor pens that I have been using, these Sailor Compass pens, and I use water-soluble inks in them. And for example, this red pen had diamine ink in it. I think it was like ox blood or something like that, which is a water pushable ink. And you can see this feed and nib are perfectly clean. There's no trace of any of the old color on this at all. And there's just a hint of some carbon black that was on this, but that was before I was using it with the red ink. So once again, we can see that the water-soluble inks, they just clean right off and leave the pens pretty much looking brand new. The diamine, on the other hand, is proving, the Atrementis, on the other hand, is proving to be a little more stubborn than that. And maybe I would have to even use some pen solvent if I really wanted to get this completely clean. I can see that it is getting lighter as I'm agitating it. You can see it here, that it's getting lighter. But if I really wanted that clean, I would have to work at it. So, with that said, let's put this pen back together. And now that we know, let's put this pen back together. And let's take a look at the Visconti ink and what it did to the pen. So let's take this pen apart. There we go. And we can see the Visconti's left a little bit of color on there, but we'll dip it in our water here, and voila, you can pretty much see there's nothing left on the nib. The nib is completely clean, and the feed, with just a little agitation with a brush in water, and the Visconti ink has completely come off of that feed. And I can put any color ink. Well, there's just a hair left on there. But if, again, I've only been doing this for seconds. Now, when you go to clean a feed, you want to make sure that you not only get the capillaries underneath, but there's a groove that runs along the top and down the bottom of the feed. And right here at this little juncture right here is where you can get ink to build up. Also right here where the grip section ends and the feed sticks out, you can get some ink way down there. And if it is water-soluble ink, like this Visconti ink, and I go and put something light like I'm going to do, which is I'm going to put Apache Sunset in here. If I go and put Apache Sunset in here, that little bit of ink will, over time, it will loosen up and it'll dissolve into the new color, and it can make the color run just a hair darker. That small amount I would have never noticed, and it's not like I'm writing anything or drawing anything that is of great importance that little amount of discoloration would have caused any problem at all. Well, let's just give this a flush too. Normally I would just take this apart and do it, but I'm kind of curious to see if it will just flush clean by doing it this way. Let's see if we can get a little better angle on it for you. Right? And again, you could just turn it upside down and agitate it. And agitate it. Get the bubbles to come up. Blurp, blurp, blurp. There they are. As you can see by that pretty much is getting this clean. I can reach in there with my Q-tip and boom. That's pretty darn clean. Now, that water has ink in it, so I've got to go on and make sure that this would be clean before I put the Noodler's Apache Sunset in this pen. But that goes to show what I wanted to show here was that the Atramentis Document ink is going to be a little harder to clean. And again, if I put another ink in this, it probably will over time slowly pick this ink up. But what's going to go into this is the Visconti ink. So if I put the Visconti ink in this and it does break it down slowly, it's not going to be a big deal because they're pretty much the same color. Maybe for a brief moment, I might not get the same kind of pushability for that ink, but I'm not much worried about that. And I'm more interested in how it sticks to the edge of the inside of that feed, if you can see that at all. And again, I've done this many times, just a little agitation on there. Whoops. You always make sure you've got a good hold of stuff. Just a little agitation on there will usually lift that off too. And there, it's almost all gone now. I've never done anything like use an abrasive. The most I've ever done is hand soap. But usually some kind of a pen flush will get any residual off of the nib, and that's not going to affect the performance of the pen in any way, shape, or form. So I can put these back together. I like to keep the same nibs with the same feeds with the same sections. I don't like mixing and matching, even though I could. These pieces are so well machined that they are interchangeable, and you wouldn't notice the difference. But just out of good practice, I don't do that. I try to keep everything uniform. And, well, I guess I'm going to clean this pen up a little more thoroughly. And I'll get back to you. So, with the magic of editing, we are back. Let me creak and crack back to my seated position here. And as you can see, everything came very clean. You can still see there's water inside of this, but you can see that these came perfectly clean. This one is now perfectly clean. You can see that there might be just a little bit of a little, staining on the inside of this one, but it's not really that bad. And as far as these feeds went, this one is now very clean. It's a little damp yet. It's still, and it too may have just a hair. Oop, I missed a spot right there. But yeah, a toothbrush and a little ivory soap, and that feed came clean. There was hardly anything to do with this. I just rinsed it out a couple of times. And if I really wanted to get crazy, I could use some pen wash on a Q-tip, or in a, sometimes I put the pen wash into one of my Peniter ink, traveling ink wells, and then I can turn the pen upside down and I can really soak the stuff through. And then stuff like this will usually just lift out, but I'm not worried about it. Again, it's not going to affect the performance of the pen. There is a spot that I can't reach, and at the bottom of this, there's a little nipple where the piston converter goes over, and I can't reach that little area down here. And sometimes there'll be just a little dark spot. You can see right here, there's another little, you might be able to see that there's a little spot right there in what is the fill gate for the injection molding process of the plastic. But otherwise, the parts have come completely clean, and I can just simply put them back together. A nice thing about these pens is they go back together one way and one way only, and they go together very easily. The parts, though they feel like they barely, they fit so loosely together, they actually, the friction fit is just fine, and I've never had any one of these come out. Unlike some pens that I've had where I have ebonite feeds, and the feeds, sometimes they slip. These never slip. I've never had, at least not for me, I've never had an issue with it. The one thing I did do once is I damaged some of the fins on this once when I was pulling it out. I grabbed it with a fingernail and pried it. One thing that you need to be careful about when you take a pen apart is that you don't pull or pinch this part here. You always want to make sure that you've got it down here by the fins. That's where something like one of these rubber sheets will come in very handy. And I use that on my more delicate pens. These are, of course, just, you know, pretty simple. They come apart very easily. But on something like on one of my, you know, better sailor pens, I would not just grab hold of that with my fingers and pull it out. I'd use a tool and keep that all in good stead. Now, with these piston converters, again, the reason why I like using this kind of steel nib pen with these Atrementis inks is because I can completely disassemble these piston converters. I can take these off, pull the plunger all the way to the top, and then just give that a little pull and pop that right off. Let's put this one over here. And then we can take that off. We can take that off of this. I can't remember the plunger arm. I can't remember what these parts are called. This is a guide. And then we have, comes completely apart. And to service this, what we can do is we can take just a little bit of silicone grease. And we can just take a little dab of that. And we'll just use this wet Q-tip and just put a little tiny dab, or a giant gob in this case, just at the top of the threads so that it'll go on just a little easier. Now, when you're using the silicone grease, the thing to remember is the silicone grease will deny the ink. And because of that, when you use the silicone grease, if the, I'm doing this wrong. The silicone grease will deny the ink. So what you want to be very careful of when you do this is to not get any silicone grease anywhere near the mouth of this piston converter. Then we just slide the whole unit back together. Now, on some converters, there will be a detente that holds this ring. In this case, I know that there isn't, so I'll just screw this on until it's tight, and then we have good piston action. And there we can see that piston working very well now. And I've got enough grease here, I may as well do this one too. Even though it doesn't really need it, we will do it anyway. And just gently slide it out. And I should put the cap back on this before I do anything else. Silly. There we are. I've got just a little bit of grease here. Looks like I've got enough to do a couple of converters. Like, I see people gob this on, and you really don't need to. It's very, 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 very slippery. And it works very, very well. You don't want to get anything like dirt. You want to make sure that I'm putting this down. I'm doing a no-no by putting this down. I should be setting this so that it stays up, because you don't want any kind of debris getting on that grease. If any debris gets on that grease, boy, oh boy, it'll score the inside of your piston, and then it won't work right. But, yeah, that works really well. Now, one thing about the Sailor piston converters is they have a lot of vacuum, and the fill holes in these feeds is very small. So if you are using the converter and trying to fill the pen this way, boy, oh boy, it feels like it's just really hard. I put that on the wrong feed. It feels like it's really hard to get it to really draw in. But a little silicone grease on the arm, on the piston arm, and that issue is greatly reduced. Well, it looks like we are done here. These pens are ready for refilling with their new ink that I will be putting on them. And again, I'm going to be putting some Apache Sunset into this pen. Now, the Apache Sunset is not a really great ink to use with an extra fine nib, but this nib on this pen writes wet enough, and I'm not going to be trying to write any really strong lines. You can still see that there's some Visconti ink in the barrel. Maybe I'll clean that off because it might bother me over time, but it looks like it's on the threads of the cap. One of the things I don't like about these kinds of clear pens is that demonstrator pens is that the ink gets on the insides of the pens and the parts, and it kind of bugs me. And so as you can see, I spend time and I reach into these with Q-tips and clean them out. Again, a little pen solvent will get the ink right off, but I find that just a little ivory soap and we'll clean it off, and it doesn't fog the plastic, and it does a fine job of getting everything clean. And these pens are now, all three of these pens are now clean and ready for duty. All right, well, I hope that you found this interesting and informative, and see you next time. Thanks for watching.